Before we begin this video, I'd like to make a quick shout out to our newest $5 Patreon supporter, the Elite Master Lord of All. Thank you so much for your support. Hello everyone, I'm RV Micah and welcome to the show where I take a look at games that I've forgotten about and try to decide if they were ever worth remembering. My gaming childhood was defined largely by three systems: the Game Boy Advance, the Xbox, and most importantly, the PlayStation 2. Considered by some to be the best video game console ever made, the PS2 was the system I spent a whole lot of my time with, and there were a lot of games I could take a look at from that system. So I held a poll on my Patreon, and the game that won out was The Simpsons Road Rage. Truth be told, I was kind of banking on Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights winning on account of that recent animated film, and while we will get to that game eventually, for now, let's talk about Road Rage. Based on the iconic sitcom that really overstayed its welcome, The Simpsons Road Rage was developed by Radical Entertainment and published by— oh, you've got to be kidding me, again! I swear I'm not doing this on purpose, okay? EA just keeps crawling out of hell to ruin my games. You might remember Radical as the team behind Tetris Worlds, a game that I found perfectly adequate, but they also developed the beloved gaming classic, Mario is Missing. Truly, these are masters of their craft. Now, I remember having a lot of fun with this game as a kid, but is it still as good as I remember? Well, considering it has the same developer as those Crash Bandicoot games for the Wii no one liked, I don't exactly have high hopes, but hey, maybe I'll be blinded by nostalgia and I'll enjoy it. Who knows? Let's find out.
Simpson, Homer Simpson, he's the greatest guy in history. From the town of Springfield.
So let's start with the opening cutscene that introduces us to our— Ugh! What am I looking at? I feel like I'm looking at broken Disney animatronics trying to act out Sonic Adventure.
Watch out! You're gonna crash! Ah!
Like, do you remember that one Halloween special where Homer entered the third dimension? Remember how unsettling he looked because he was never meant to be rendered in 3D? Well, imagine that character model, but given a budget of $6, lit with the lighting engine from Bubsy 3D, and all the characters look like that. That's this game. Now, believe it or not, the game looking this way was a conscious decision on the part of the developers. See, originally the game had an art style that represented the show a lot more, but then Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, waltzed in and said, "Hey wait, you want this game based on a cartoon to look like a cartoon? That's stupid. It's not like 3D graphics age like milk compared to 2D graphics and unique art styles that blur the line hold up years later." But you gotta admit, they had a point. Making a game look like animation is something that would never work. I mean, just look at The Wind Waker. Well, no. Just look at Cuphead. Well. Anyway, once your eyes are done throwing up, you learn that the game's plot is that Mr. Burns bought out all the public transportation in Springfield in order to force the people to pay for his replacement transport service. That's bad enough on its own, but there's more to it.
Behold the Burns Atomic Megabus. Faster, cheaper, and completely safe. Please kill me.
That poor man. I hope someone does kill him.
Those radioactive buses are a threat to the public health.
Nuclear power is one of the cleanest and most reliable sources of energy that we have. Up yours, game. So with Springfield's public transportation at stake, the people of Springfield devise a solution, using their own cars as taxis to raise the $1 million needed to buy back the buses. What? Regular people using their own cars as a freelance taxi service? That's the dumbest thing that I've ever— Ah, dang it, my Uber driver's gonna be late. On to the game itself. Your objective is to pick people up and take them to their destination as fast as possible, just like Crazy Taxi. All this is happening under an overall time limit, and you get a slight amount of time by picking someone up, just like Crazy Taxi. You're trying to earn as much money as possible before time runs out to get the high score, just like Crazy Taxi. Boy, this game sure is similar to Crazy Taxi. So much so, in fact, that EA and Radical were actually sued by Sega over the similarities. The lawsuit was eventually settled, but honestly, Sega needn't have bothered. Road Rage is very much a game built on the skeleton of Crazy Taxi. So what does it do to set itself apart? Good question. Heck, it's not even a clone of Crazy Taxi per se, because while that game has unique mechanics like stunts and picking up entire groups of passengers, this game doesn't really have anything like that. The closest thing it has is certain passengers give you a bonus challenge, like, for example, Marge or Flanders giving you a bonus if you drive safely, or Homer giving you a bonus for doing the exact opposite of that. Oh, and now that we've gotten into the game proper, the graphics haven't improved. If anything, they look worse. Look at this, the car looks fine, it's got a bold outline, looks almost like it's cel-shaded, but then you get to the character models and they don't have that outline and the shading is so much worse. It's this horrible clash that really distracts me. You'll also notice that you start out with only 5 drivers in one starting location. That's because you accumulate more and more money and start to unlock more characters and more locations as you play the game. This being a Simpsons game, you naturally have a massive cast to choose from, between the family themselves, Krusty the Clown, Professor Frank, Groundskeeper Willie, Moe, and all the rest. And you know what? It's not a half-bad lineup, even if it does shamelessly exclude my favorite character, Comic Book Guy.
Worst
roster
ever.
Each one of them drives a different car with different stats. Some are faster, some can make sharper turns, some of them are better at throwing their weight around. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Of course, it would have been great to actually see these stats when you pick your character. I swear, I honestly thought they all played identically until I tried playing as Groundskeeper Willie and found that his tractor had all the handling of a Bubsy game. It's just, what point is there to hide the stats like this? It's just the little things that add up over time, you know? Let's talk about something that's not a problem, the maps themselves. You have 6 different locations to choose between, each one loaded to the brim with familiar locations from the show. It's great if you're a Simpsons fan who recognizes a location that appeared like once. In fact, while you don't really have time to explore during the regular arcade mode, there's another mode called Sunday Drive, where you can drive around at your own pace, practice for the actual game, or just screw around and find hidden areas. Like, I was endlessly amused by the fact that you can just drive straight through Springfield Elementary, and you can occasionally see costume mascots for the Springfield Isotopes that you can basically run over at your leisure. Yeah, take that, Isotopes, this is payback for Albuquerque. Of course, when you start the game, you only have one of those maps to explore. I mean, that's fine, I don't expect to have everything available from the start, and there is a system for unlocking things. All the money you earn in Road Rage actually goes into a big pool, and you get to unlock stuff once you hit certain milestones, kind of like leveling up. Now, in theory, this is a pretty good system, but there's a few problems with it. First, there's the fact that it takes a total of $1 million to buy back the transit system, so that's the requirement for unlocking everything. Now, an average round of Road Rage will net you a score of about $5,000. If the high scores are any indication, that can go as high as $10,000. So if you do the math, in order to complete the game, you need to play Road Rage somewhere between 100 and 200 times. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that honestly isn't that bad. What it is, however, is mind-numbingly repetitive. You have to play the same game over and over and over again to progress. Even if you unlock all the maps as quickly as possible, there are only 6 of them, so there's really not a ton of variety when you really think about it. Oh, and at the end of every round, Mr. Burns shows up to threaten you.
A shiny new donkey to the man who brings me the head of Homer Simpson.
Hey, wait a minute! I thought Mr. Burns could never remember Homer's name! This game is a disgrace! The dialogue in general is also a bit lacking. It carries that licensed game vibe of, oh, this side character is only in the game for like 30 seconds, we need to have them say their main personality trait. Or failing that, just use out-of-context famous lines from the show. Yeah, it's one of those games, you know? It was at this point that I opted to try out the third mode that I hadn't touched on yet. Surely Mission Mode will provide another way to earn money. Well, I tried it out, and I regret to inform you that all it does is unlock that monstrosity of a vehicle Homer helped design in that one episode. So the only way to unlock stuff is to play the same few levels at least 100 times. To put it in perspective, look at Super Smash Bros. Melee, released that very same year. Most of its content was locked from the get-go, but you had all sorts of ways to unlock things. From clearing a certain game mode on a certain difficulty to playing enough multiplayer rounds, it always felt like you were earning your rewards rather than merely grinding for them. And the thing is, the game was supposed to be much more ambitious. The original plan for the game was to allow you to freely explore all of Springfield in one big unified map. But the thing about porting your game to all current systems is that you kinda have to program for the lowest common denominator and cut corners here and there. The PS2 just wasn't able to handle it, and as a result, different sections of Springfield are walled off from one another and treated as standalone levels. This game would eventually get a sort of follow-up called Simpsons Hit and Run, and from what I heard, that game was much, much better. I haven't played it, nor do I have any plans to, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. At the very least, it's probably better than this game. At its core, Simpsons Road Rage is not bad. It's perfectly serviceable and definitely a fun way to waste a few hours if you want to break out your PS2, but it's not what I would go out of my way to get with its repetitive, bare-bones gameplay and ugly graphics. And because the base game is so lacking, it's one of those instances where all of my minor nitpicks actually do start to add up over time. In the end, The Simpsons Road Rage is mediocre, 5 out of 10. I really thought that there'd be more to this game. Oh well, we still got some time to kill, why don't we give the Game Boy Advance version a shot? Yeah, much like Tetris Worlds, it also got a Game Boy Advance port by a completely different developer and publisher. This game can barely hold its own on consoles, so what can a handheld of this game possibly do? Well, I'll be darned, this is actually kind of impressive. There was real effort put into this. It might not look like much to the untrained eye, but for the Game Boy Advance, this looks pretty darn impressive, especially compared to other GBA games. For comparison's sake, here's what Mario Kart on the Game Boy Advance looked like. And The Simpsons Road Rage weirdly hits it out of the park. I mean, it has slopes, which are pretty much unheard of for games on hardware like this. That already sets it apart from other handheld games of the time, but it actually has another mode compared to the console version, Performance Mode. In this mode, you have to drive as crazy as possible and destroy as much stuff as you can. But the thing is, each passenger has certain preferences for stuff they want to hit. And surprise, surprise, this actually adds to your money total. And since there are 21 passengers in the game, each round you play of it will be slightly different. Combine that with the sprite graphics that age much more gracefully than whatever the heck these things are. Honestly, I really do think the Game Boy Advance version is the superior one. It's not fantastic, but it's definitely worth a 7 out of 10 if you ask me. Maybe it's just the lower standards, but honestly, I'm kind of impressed by this. Now, the 1990s and the 20-aughts were a haven for licensed games like this. Some of them were surprisingly really good, some of them were hilariously awful and worthy of mockery, but a vast majority of them are like Road Rage. They came, they went, and the world kept moving. But they still had this undeniable charm to them. In an age before streaming, when the movie was over with the credits and the next episode wasn't until next week, licensed games were a welcome way to see more of your favorite characters in a whole new way. Most of them were pretty average and went to the bargain bin almost immediately, but hey, we still loved them. And hey, even if it ultimately didn't live up to my expectations, it was still fun to dig this out years later and toy around with it for a few hours. See you next time!
Worst episode ever.